The morning sun cast long shadows across the red rocks of planet Kepler 442b as Captain Tyke crawled slowly up the steep hillside. His uniform was dirty and torn from 3 days of moving through the harsh terrain without rest. His squad of 12 soldiers followed behind him like ghosts, staying low and quiet as they had been trained. They were hunting for weeks now. Strange reports had been coming from the outer colonies. Ships disappearing without sending distress signals, entire mining stations going silent overnight, leaving behind only empty buildings and scattered equipment. The military command suspected alien activity, but they had no proof, no witnesses, no idea what they were dealing with. Tyke paused at the ridge and pulled out his scope. The valley below was supposed to be empty according to their satellite maps. Nothing lived here except poisonous plants and deadly creatures that could kill a man in seconds. The air itself was barely breathable, and the temperature dropped, below freezing every night. But something was moving down there. He adjusted the focus on his scope and felt his heart stop. A girl sat in the middle of the valley floor. She looked human, maybe 16 or 17 years old, with long black hair tied back in a simple ponytail. Her clothes were patched and dirty, like she had been living rough for months, but she was alive and moving. And that should have been impossible on this death world. But that was not the strangest part. Beside her lay the largest creature Tyke had ever seen. The thing was massive, easily 3 meters tall and twice as long. Its body was covered in thick scales that changed color as he watched, shifting from deep blue to green to gray, like living metal. Its head was the size of a small car, with jaws that could snap a person in half without effort. 6 powerful legs ended in claws that could tear through battle armor, and its tail was lined with razor-sharp spikes. The military databases called this species Apex Deathstalkers and classified them as the most dangerous predators on any known world. A single one could wipe out an entire platoon of trained soldiers. The standing orders were to call in orbital bombardment if you ever saw one, and hope you lived long enough for the missiles to arrive. This girl was sitting next to one like it was a pet dog. Tyke rubbed his eyes and looked again, thinking the alien atmosphere might be making him see things. But no, the scene was real. The girl was gently brushing the creature's thick mane with her fingers while it made soft rumbling sounds that almost sounded like purring. She was talking to it. He could not hear the words, but he could see her lips moving as she showed the creature something on a small device. The massive head tilted to one side, listening with what looked like genuine interest. Those burning orange eyes that should have been scanning for prey were focused completely on whatever she was showing it. This was not a predator stalking its next meal. This was something else entirely. Lieutenant Minho crawled up beside him and whispered what he was seeing. Tyke handed over the scope without taking his own eyes off the impossible scene below. His second in command took one look and cursed, softly in 3 different languages. The communication device on Tyke's belt buzzed with an incoming message from base command. Colonel Hyunwoo wanted a status report on their reconnaissance mission. They were supposed to be mapping alien movement patterns in this sector and reporting back within the hour. How do you report something like this? How do you tell your commanding officer that everything they know about this planet is wrong? That a teenage girl is somehow living peacefully with the most dangerous creature in the galaxy, Sergeant Yunji. Their squad xenobiologist had joined them at the ridge. She took the scope and studied the scene with professional interest. After several minutes, she passed it back to Tyke and shook her head. The creature was definitely an apex deathstalker, but its behavior made no sense. According to every study ever done, these creatures were solitary hunters that killed anything that moved in their territory. They had no pack instincts, no social behaviors, no ability to form bonds with other species, yet this one was clearly comfortable with human presence. More than comfortable. It seemed to be enjoying itself. The girl stood up and stretched like she was getting ready to move. The creature immediately lifted its massive head and made a questioning sound. She patted its neck and pointed toward a cluster of rocks about a kilometer away. The beast rose to its feet with liquid grace and began walking in that direction, while the girl walked beside it. She was not riding it or controlling it with any device. They were simply moving together like old friends taking a morning walk through the countryside. The creature kept its head turned slightly toward her, listening as she continued, talking and occasionally making soft replies. Private Jisoo, the youngest member of their squad, asked in a shaky voice if they should call for backup or air support. Tyke almost said yes. The standard protocol was clear when facing an apex Deathstalker. You retreat immediately and call for heavy weapon support. But something held him back. Maybe it was the way the girl moved without fear or tension. Maybe it was how the creature seemed to respond to her voice, or the fact that they appeared to be having some kind of conversation. Whatever it was, every instinct told him that interrupting this scene with military force would be the wrong choice. The creature suddenly stopped walking and raised its head. Its nostrils flared as it tested the air currents. The girl stopped too and followed its gaze directly toward their hiding spot on the ridge. Those burning orange eyes locked onto Take's position with uncomfortable accuracy. The massive beast made a sound that was somewhere between a growl and what almost sounded like laughter. It nudged the girl with its head, and she turned to look up at the hillside where 12 human soldiers were trying to stay invisible behind rocks and scrub brush. She cupped her hands around her mouth and called out in perfect Korean, "Are you just going to hide up there all day like scared children? Or do you actually need help?" Her voice carried clearly across the valley floor, confident and amused, like she dealt with hidden soldiers every day. The creature beside her made another sound that definitely sounded like laughter this time. Tyke's communication device buzzed again. Command wanted their report, and they wanted it now. He looked down at the girl who was still watching them with obvious amusement while standing next to a creature that could kill them all in seconds. He looked at his squad, who were waiting for orders that he had no idea how to give. Everything they had been taught about this planet, about these creatures, about survival, in hostile territory, was being challenged by what they saw below. A teenage girl had somehow achieved what the entire human military had failed to do. She had found a way to not just survive on this death world, but to thrive. The question was whether she was humanity's greatest hope or its most dangerous enemy, and there was only one way to find out. He stood up slowly from behind the rocks and raised both hands to show he carried no weapons. The girl in the valley below nodded approvingly, while the massive creature beside her watched every movement with those burning orange eyes. The descent down the hillside felt like the longest walk of Take's life. Every step brought his squad closer to a creature that could kill them all in seconds. Yet the beast remained perfectly still as 12 armed soldiers approached its position. The only sign of awareness was the gentle swaying of its spiked tail, and the way its nostrils continued testing their scent. Lieutenant Minho whispered that this was insane, but he kept walking. Sergeant Yunji had her scanner out, taking readings and muttering about impossible biological signatures. Private Jisoo looked like he wanted to run, but his training kept his feet moving forward. When they were about 20 meters away, the girl held up her hand and they stopped. She looked them over with intelligent brown eyes that seemed much older than her teenage face. Her clothes were patched with pieces of different materials, some that looked like they came from human equipment and others that definitely did not. Her boots were worn thin, and her hands showed calluses from months of hard survival, but she was alive and healthy on a planet that should have killed her in days. "My name is Nara," she said in clear Korean. "I crashed here 8 months ago with colony ship Hanbok. Most of my people died in the impact, but some of us tried to build a settlement." She scratched behind what looked like the creature's ear, and it made a pleased rumbling sound. "This is Baram, and before you ask, yes, I know what your military files say about his species. They are wrong about almost everything." Sergeant Yunji stepped forward with her scanner still beeping and asked how that was possible. The creatures they called apex Deathstalkers had been studied for years. They were solitary predators with no social instincts and no ability to form bonds with other species. Nara laughed, and the sound was not bitter, just tired. "Your scientists studied them by shooting them and cutting them apart. Did any of them try talking to one?" The massive creature, Baram, lifted its head and made a complex series of sounds that almost seemed like language. Nara listened carefully and nodded like she understood every word. "He wants to know why you smell so afraid," she said. "Your weapons cannot hurt him much anyway, so there is no point in being nervous." Private Jisoo made a strangled sound and took a step backward, but Captain Tyke held his ground. "You said most of your people died," he said. What happened to the others? Nara's expression grew sad. She explained that after the crash 43 colonists had survived the impact. They tried to follow standard survival protocols, building shelters, rationing supplies, and sending distress signals, but the planet had other plans. The wildlife was more aggressive than anyone expected. Poisonous. Plants released spores that could kill in minutes. Strange flying creatures attacked anything that moved during daylight hours. And at night, the apex deathstalkers came hunting. One by one, the survivors disappeared. Some were taken by flying predators. Others walked into poisonous plant groves and never came back. A few simply vanished in the night, leaving behind only bloodstains and torn clothing. After 6 weeks, only 12 colonists remained. After 3 months, there were only 4. After 6 months, Nara was alone. She had 2 choices: wait to die or try something different. Lieutenant Minho asked what she meant by something different. Nara pointed to Bahram, who was now lying on his side like a giant cat soaking up the morning sun. I spent 2 weeks watching them, she said. The Deathstalkers. I mean, your files say they are mindless killers, but that is not true. They hunt because they need food. They kill because they are afraid. They fight because they do not understand. She had observed their hunting patterns, their territorial behaviors, their social signals. Most importantly, she had watched what happened when they encountered something new. Fear made them aggressive. Aggression made them deadly. But curiosity made them careful. Instead of hiding or fighting, she had tried a third option. I walked out into the open with no weapons and a bag full of food. She said, I sat down about 50 meters from a pack of 3 Deathstalkers and I waited. For 6 hours, she sat in the open. While the creatures circled her, they could have killed her at any moment, but something held them back. Maybe it was her complete lack of aggressive behavior. Maybe it was the smell of the food she carried. Maybe it was simple curiosity about this strange new creature. Eventually, the smallest of the 3 approached. It was not Bahram, but a younger female who seemed more willing to take risks. She came close enough to sniff Nara and accept a piece of dried meat. Then she sat down nearby and waited to see what would happen next. The other 2 joined them after another hour. By sunset, Nara was sharing her food with 3 of the most dangerous predators on the planet. By the end of the week, she was sleeping in their den. By the end of the month, she was part of their pack. Sergeant Yunji asked how that was even possible from a biological standpoint. The creatures were not mammals. They should not have pack bonding instincts. Bahram made another series of complex sounds and Nara translated. Says your scientists never bothered to learn their language, so they missed all the important things. They are not just predators. They are intelligent. They have families, territories, traditions. They even have names for each other. The creature that Nara called Bahram was actually the leader of his pack before human military strikes killed the others. He had been alone for months before she found him lonely and grieving and desperate for any kind of companionship, even from a strange alien species. When she offered friendship instead of violence, food instead of weapons, patience instead of fear, he had responded with trust. But there was more. Nara pointed toward the northern horizon where smoke could be seen rising from several locations. Are not alone on this planet, she said. There are others here. Others who do not want humans to survive. Captain Tyke felt his blood run cold as Nara explained about the Vorth Empire. They had mining operations throughout the northern territories, mining rare minerals that were found only on this world. They had been here for years, killing off the native wildlife to clear territory for their operations. The Deathstalkers had been fighting them long before humans arrived, losing badly because they could not match Vorth technology. But now, with human intelligence combined with their natural abilities, the balance was shifting. Bahram made another sound and stood up. His massive head turned toward the north, and his body tensed like a hunting. Nara nodded grimly. He smells their machines, she said. They are coming this way. 3, maybe 4 of their patrol vehicles. Still about 10 kilometers out, but moving fast. She looked at the 12 human soldiers with something like pity. Your weapons will not stop them, and your armor will not protect you. But Bahram and his cousins have been hunting Vorth for years. They know every weakness, every blind spot, every way to kill them quietly. Private Jisoo asked shakily what she meant by cousins. 3. More shapes emerged from rocky hiding places around the valley. Each was slightly smaller than Baram, but just as deadly looking. Their scales shifted color to match the terrain, making them almost invisible, even in daylight. 4 Apex, Deathstalkers, and 1 human girl against Vorth military technology. Captain Tyke reached for his communication device to call for backup, but Nara shook her head. "There is no time," she said. "And besides, your commanders would just order an orbital strike that would kill everything in this valley, including you." She climbed onto Baram's back like she had done it 1,000 times before. "If you want to live and learn something that might save your species, you will follow me. If you want to die like the rest of your kind, keep following your military manuals." The 4 creatures began moving north with liquid grace, their scales shifting constantly to blend with the landscape. Nara rode Baram like she was born to it, guiding him with gentle touches and soft words. Captain Tyke had a choice: follow the girl into certain danger or stay behind and wait for death to find them. He chose to follow. His squad fell in behind him as they began the most important hunt of their lives. The hunt began before Captain Tyke fully understood what he had agreed to follow. Nara and the 4 Deathstalkers moved through the rocky terrain like water flowing downhill, silent and fluid, and completely at home in the harsh landscape. The human soldiers struggled to keep up, even with their enhanced gear and military training. Baram, the largest of the creatures, carried Nara with ease. His massive form barely disturbed the loose rocks as he navigated between boulders and through narrow passages. The other 3 beasts spread out in a hunting formation that spoke of years of cooperative experience. Sergeant Yunji whispered into her comm device, trying to explain their situation to base command, but the words sounded insane, even to her. "How? Do you report that your reconnaissance squad is now part of a hunting pack, led by a teenage girl riding a monster?" The Vorth patrol was moving fast, but they were following predictable routes along the valley floor. Their vehicles were designed for speed and firepower, not for the kind of terrain where Deathstalkers preferred to hunt. The creatures had every advantage except numbers and technology. Nara guided them to a ridge overlooking the patrol route and held up her hand for silence. Below them, 3 Vorth vehicles were approaching, sleek hovering craft with energy weapons that could vaporize human soldiers, and armor plating that could deflect most conventional weapons. Each vehicle carried 4 Vorth soldiers in environmental suits. The aliens were tall and thin, with elongated heads and pale gray skin. Their eyes were adapted for low-light conditions, but they relied heavily on their technology for navigation and target identification. Lieutenant Minho asked quietly how they were supposed to fight something like that with claws and teeth. Nara smiled and pointed to the creatures who were already moving into position: watch and learn. She said the Deathstalkers had done this before. Baram positioned himself above the patrol route where falling rocks would provide natural camouflage. The second creature, a female that Nara called Hana, moved to the opposite side of the valley. The other 2 took positions at either end of the natural ambush zone when the first Vorth vehicle entered the kill zone. Nothing happened for several seconds. The aliens continued their patrol sweep, scanning for human activity with their advanced sensors, but finding nothing. The Deathstalkers' scales had shifted to match the rock formations, so perfectly that even human eyes could barely detect them. Then Baram dropped from his perch. 3 tons of muscle bone and razor-sharp claws struck the lead vehicle with devastating force. The impact crushed the vehicle's hovering system and sent it crashing into the rocky ground before the pilot could react. The energy weapon spun wildly as the craft rolled end over end. The other creatures struck simultaneously. Hana leaped onto the second vehicle and began tearing through its armor with methodical precision. Her claws found weak points in the hull and ripped them open like a can opener, while the Vorth soldiers inside scrambled for their weapons. The 3rd and 4th Deathstalkers hit the final vehicle from both sides. Their combined weight and momentum flipped it completely over, trapping the crew inside an upside-down wreck. The entire ambush lasted less than 30 seconds. Captain Tyke and his squad watched in stunned silence as the creatures finished their work. None of the 4th soldiers survived, but more importantly, none of them had time to send a distress signal. The patrol had simply vanished without alerting their base to the presence of human forces. Nara slid down from Baram's back and began examining the wrecked vehicles. The Deathstalkers were already stripping useful materials from the wreckage. They worked with surprising intelligence, separating power cells from weapon systems and intact equipment from damaged components. "Your turn," she said to the human soldiers. Sergeant Yunji approached one of the vehicles with her scanner running. The Vorth technology was years ahead of human engineering, but much of it was still recognizable. Energy weapons, communication systems, navigation equipment, all of it could provide valuable intelligence to human command private. Jisoo asked nervously if there would be more patrols. Nara nodded grimly. The Vorth ran regular sweeps through this territory every few days. This patrol was already overdue, which meant search teams would be dispatched within hours. But that was exactly what she wanted. Over the next 6 hours, they repeated the ambush 4 more times. Each Vorth patrol that came looking for the missing vehicles walked into the same trap. The death. Stalkers learned from each encounter, refining their tactics and improving their coordination. By evening, 12 Vorth vehicles had been destroyed, and nearly 50 alien soldiers were dead. The creatures had suffered no casualties, and the human squad had gained more intelligence about Vorth operations than months of conventional reconnaissance. More importantly, they had proven that the alliance could work. Lieutenant Minho established contact with Colonel Hyunwoo at Human Base Command. The colonel's response was immediate and predictable. He wanted the squad to return to base immediately with the girl and whatever intelligence they had gathered. Nara refused to leave. She explained that moving the Deathstalkers away from their territory would break the bonds she had spent months building. These creatures were not pets or weapons. They were partners who had chosen to work with humans because they saw mutual benefit in cooperation. The Vorth had been killing their species for years before humans arrived. Now they had a chance for revenge, but only if the alliance remained strong. Trust once broken could not easily be rebuilt. Sergeant Yunji supported Nara's position in her report to command. She explained that what they had witnessed was unprecedented in human xenobiology, a complex interspecies cooperation that went far beyond simple domestication. The creatures showed clear intelligence, communication abilities, and strategic thinking. They had their own social structure, territory, and culture. Human military doctrine had no framework for dealing with true alien allies rather than conquered subjects or dangerous enemies. Captain Tyke found himself in an impossible position. His orders were clear. Bring the girl and any useful intelligence back to base for evaluation. But his experience told him that following those orders would destroy something valuable and irreplaceable. The debate was interrupted when Baram and the other creatures suddenly became agitated. Their heads lifted as one, testing the air currents. Their bodies tensed in the characteristic hunting posture that meant they had detected something dangerous. Nara listened to their warning calls and her face went pale. "Orbital surveillance," she said. "The Vorth have been tracking their missing patrols. They know something is hunting their forces in this area, high above the planet." Vorth ships were scanning the surface with sensors designed to penetrate rock and detect heat signatures. The Deathstalkers' natural camouflage could fool ground-based systems, but orbital scans were a different threat. Worse, the aliens were preparing a response that would eliminate any possible threat to their operations. Nara pointed to the northern horizon where new lights were appearing in the sky. Troop transports, she said. At least a dozen of them carrying full combat squads. They will be here before dawn. Captain Tyke realized they were facing a force that neither human soldiers nor Deathstalkers could handle alone. The Vorth were bringing enough firepower to sterilize the entire valley and everything in it. But Nara was already planning their next move. She had spent months learning not just about one Deathstalker pack, but about the entire ecosystem of intelligent predators that called this planet home. The creatures they had been working with were just the beginning. Baram made a deep thrumming call that echoed across the valley. Within minutes, answering calls came back from a dozen different directions. The sound was picked up and repeated by creatures hidden throughout the rocky terrain until the entire region resonated with the hunting song of an awakening army. The real war was about to begin. Dawn arrived with the sound of Vorth troop ships screaming through the atmosphere. Captain Tyke counted at least 15 heavy transports, each one capable of carrying a full combat squad with advanced weapons and armor. The alien ships moved in, perfect formation sweeping the valley with sensor beams that could detect a human heartbeat from orbit, but they found nothing. The Deathstalkers had vanished into the landscape like ghosts, taking Nara and the human soldiers with them. Hidden caves and rocky overhangs provided shelter from the orbital scans, while underground passages allowed movement without detection. Nara had led them to a cavern system that went deep into the planet's crust. The passages were large enough for the massive creatures to move freely, but too narrow for Vorth vehicles to follow. Ancient carvings on the walls suggested the caves had been used as shelters for thousands of years. "This is their real home," she whispered, as they moved through tunnels lit by phosphorescent fungi. "Your military never found these places because they only looked on the surface. The caverns were full of Deathstalkers, dozens of them ranging from juveniles barely larger than humans to ancient creatures that dwarfed even Baram. Each one was unique in size, coloring, and temperament, but all showed the same intelligence that had allowed cooperation with humans." Sergeant Yunji ran continuous scans trying to catalog the incredible biodiversity around them. Some creatures had developed specialized abilities for different environments: climbers with extra limbs for vertical surfaces, burrowers with reinforced claws for digging, swimmers with gill slits for underwater hunting. All of them had been fighting the Vorth occupation. For years, Lieutenant Minho established encrypted communication with human base command. Colonel Hyunwoo was leading a full battalion toward their position, but the Vorth air presence made any rescue attempt impossible. The colonel demanded a full situation report and clear intelligence on enemy capabilities. What he got instead was a proposal that changed everything. Nara had spent the night in deep discussion with the Deathstalker elders. Their communication was a mixture of sounds, gestures, and what appeared to be primitive telepathy. The creatures had been debating something important, and they had reached a decision. They wanted to take the war to the Vorth home base. The alien mining operation was centered around a massive facility, built into the side of a mountain 50 kilometers to the north. The complex was heavily fortified with energy shields, orbital defense platforms, and enough firepower to level a city. Human military doctrine considered it an impossible target. Any conventional assault would require overwhelming force and would result in massive casualties. Even then, success was not guaranteed. But the Deathstalkers knew something about the facility that human intelligence had missed. Deep beneath the mining complex was a network of natural caves that connected to the underground river system. The aliens had built their base on top of the creature's original territory, without realizing that tunnels ran directly under their most critical installations. Baram and the other pack leaders had been planning this assault for months. They knew every weakness in the Vorth defenses, every blind spot in their sensor coverage, every way to strike at their vital systems. What they lacked was the technical knowledge to disable alien technology and the strategic coordination to make the attack decisive. That was where humans came in. Captain Tyke found himself planning the most ambitious joint operation in military history. 40 Deathstalkers working with 12 human soldiers to destroy a target that conventional forces could not touch. The plan was insane. Phase 1 would begin at sunset, when the creature's natural advantages were greatest. Small teams of Deathstalkers, guided by human technical specialists, would infiltrate the underground passages and move into position beneath key installations. Phase 2 involved simultaneous strikes against the mining complex, power generation, communications, and defensive systems. The creatures would provide the assault capability while humans identified priority targets and coordinated the attacks. Phase 3 was the dangerous part. With the base defenses down, the main force would strike from multiple directions. The goal was not just to destroy the facility, but to capture intact technology and intelligence that could change the balance of power in the war. Private Jisoo asked what would happen if they failed. Nara looked around the cavern at dozens of creatures who had been fighting a losing war for years. They had lost their territory, their packmates, their hope of survival. The Vorth were systematically exterminating their species to clear land for mining operations. "If we fail," she said, "then they die anyway. At least this way they die fighting." Colonel Hyunwoo arrived with his battalion just as the sun began to set. His 300 soldiers took defensive positions around the valley, while he demanded to speak with Captain Take and the girl who had supposedly tamed monsters. The meeting did not go well. The colonel was a career military officer who believed in overwhelming firepower, strict hierarchy, and treating all non-human species as either resources or threats. The idea of forming an alliance with alien creatures was against every protocol in the book. He ordered Nara to demonstrate control over the Deathstalkers by making them perform simple commands. When she explained that they were partners, not pets, he accused her of being delusional or worse, a traitor working with alien forces against human interests. The demonstration that followed changed his mind. Vorth reconnaissance drones had detected the human battalion and were moving in to investigate 6 advanced surveillance units equipped with stealth technology and defensive shields. They would gather intelligence on human capabilities and then call in orbital strikes to eliminate the threat. Colonel Hyunwoo prepared to engage with conventional anti-aircraft weapons. Despite the drones' advanced technology, human missiles could probably destroy them, but the noise and energy signatures would alert every Vorth unit within 100 kilometers. Nara suggested a different approach. The Deathstalkers moved like liquid death through the evening shadows. Their scales shifted to match the darkening sky, making them nearly invisible even to advanced sensors. 6 creatures, 6 drones each one, a perfect match of predator and prey. The drones never saw them coming, leaping from concealed positions. The Deathstalkers struck with surgical precision. Their claws were designed to tear through armor, and their intelligence allowed them to identify weak points in alien technology. Within minutes, all 6 drones were disabled, without sending any data back to the Vorth. Command Colonel Hyunwoo watched the engagement through his field glasses as creatures he had thought were mindless beasts demonstrated tactical coordination that rivaled his best special forces units. But the real test came when Vorth ground forces responded to the missing drones. 2 full companies of alien soldiers supported by heavy weapons and energy shields advanced into the valley expecting to find human resistance. Instead, they found something their training had never prepared them. 4 Deathstalkers, guided by human intelligence, struck from every direction using the terrain and darkness to negate the aliens' technological advantages. Creatures that could move silently through any environment, combined with soldiers who understood enemy weaknesses and vital systems. The battle lasted 20 minutes when it ended. 90 Vorth soldiers were dead, and their equipment was being systematically salvaged by creatures who seemed to understand the value of each component. Colonel Hyunwoo realized he was looking at a new form of warfare that could change the balance of power throughout the galaxy. He gave authorization for the assault on the mining complex. The real test was about to begin. The assault on the Vorth mining complex began 3 hours before dawn, when the first Deathstalker teams entered the underground river system. Nara had spent days mapping the tunnel network with Baram and the Pack Elders. The ancient passages ran for kilometers beneath the alien facility, connecting natural chambers that were large enough to hide entire armies. The Vorth had built their base without ever realizing they were sitting on top of a highway system used by intelligent predators. Captain Tyke led the human technical team through passages that had been carved by water and time over millions of years. The Deathstalkers moved through the darkness with perfect confidence, their enhanced senses guiding them past underground pools and treacherous rock falls. Sergeant Yoonji monitored alien communications from her portable equipment. The Vorth were conducting routine operations with no awareness that 40 of the galaxy's deadliest predators were moving into position directly beneath their most vital installations. The mining complex was massive. A mountain had been hollowed out to house processing equipment, storage facilities, and defensive systems. The main power plant supplied energy for operations across 3 continents, while communication arrays maintained contact with the Vorth home fleet. All of it was about to become a battlefield. Lieutenant Minho reached the first objective at exactly 0300 hours. The main power distribution center was located in a chamber carved from solid rock with access tunnels that the Vorth considered too small for any serious threat. They had not considered Deathstalkers. 2 creatures squeezed through passages that human soldiers could barely navigate. Their flexible bone structure allowed them to compress their bodies and move through spaces that seemed impossibly tight. When they emerged in the power center, they found 12 Vorth technicians working routine maintenance shifts. The aliens died without raising an alarm. Minho and his team moved in behind the creatures to disable the power grid, according to plans they had developed with Nara's help. The Deathstalkers understood which systems were vital, but humans knew how to sabotage them. Effectively, Phase 2 began. When every light in the mining complex went dark, emergency power kicked in within seconds, but the backup systems were designed to maintain life support, not full operational capability. The Vorth found themselves operating in dim red lighting with reduced sensor coverage and limited communication. That was when the real assault began. Barum led the main force up through drainage tunnels that opened directly into the processing center. The largest chamber in the complex was full of massive machinery, designed to extract rare minerals from tons of raw ore. It was also full of Vorth workers who had never faced a Deathstalker in close combat. The creatures moved through the machinery like shadows, using the complex equipment for cover as they systematically eliminated alien personnel. Their natural hunting instincts combined with human tactical knowledge made them unstoppable in confined spaces. Private Jisu emerged from a maintenance shaft behind a group of Vorth guards who were trying to establish a defensive perimeter. His human weapons were almost unnecessary. The Deathstalkers had already eliminated most of the opposition, but he provided covering fire that kept the aliens from regrouping. Nara rode on Baram's back through corridors that echoed with alien alarm signals. She guided the massive creature toward the communication center using maps she had memorized during their planning sessions. The facility was designed to withstand human military tactics, but the architects had never considered attackers who could climb walls, move through ventilation systems, and appear from directions that seemed impossible. Hana, the female Deathstalker, who had been with them since the beginning, led a team through the ventilation network. Her smaller size allowed her to reach areas that even Baram could not access. She emerged in the communication center, just as Vorth officers were trying to send distress signals to their orbital fleet. The signals never got through. By 0400 hours, the mining complex was in complete chaos. Power systems failed throughout the facility, leaving sections of the base in total darkness. Communications were down, preventing coordination between different areas, and the defensive systems were operating on backup power that could not support full functionality. But the Vorth were not helpless. Colonel Dracos, the alien commander, had been fighting insurgent actions for years. He recognized the signs of coordinated assault and began implementing emergency protocols that would deny the attackers any permanent victory. If he could not save the facility, he would destroy it along with everyone inside. The self-destruct sequence would take 10 minutes to complete, giving his surviving personnel time to reach escape pods while eliminating any intelligence or technology that might fall into enemy hands. Nara intercepted the countdown signal and realized they had walked into a trap. The Vorth were willing to lose the entire mining operation if it meant destroying the Deathstalker Alliance and the human soldiers who had made it possible. She had to choose between completing the mission and saving the lives of creatures who had trusted her with their future. Captain Tyke reached the Central Command Center with 2 Deathstalkers and found Colonel Dracos waiting with a dozen elite guards. The alien officer was tall even by Vorth standards, with cybernetic implants that enhanced his combat capabilities. The battle for the command center was brutal and decisive. Human weapons and Deathstalker claws combined to overwhelm the alien defenses, but not before Colonel Dracos activated multiple security systems. The facility began sealing itself, section by section, trapping attackers in areas that would become death traps when the main explosion occurred. Sergeant Yunji worked frantically to disable the self-destruct sequence, while Deathstalkers held off waves of Vorth reinforcements. The aliens were throwing everything they had at the command center, including automated defense systems and combat robots. With 3 minutes left on the countdown, she found the abort codes, the explosion that should have destroyed the mining complex, and everyone in it never came. Instead, the facility fell into complete silence as the last Vorth defenders surrendered or fled. 40 Deathstalkers and 12 human soldiers had captured the largest alien installation on the planet. But the real victory was what they found in the computers. Vorth had been planning something far worse than strip mining. They were preparing to sterilize the entire planet, using biological weapons that would kill every living thing on the surface. The Deathstalkers were not just defending their territory, they were fighting for the survival of their species. More importantly, the captured data revealed the locations of Vorth facilities throughout the sector. Many of them were built on worlds where indigenous species had been fighting similar losing battles against alien occupation. Nara realized that what had started as one girl's attempt to survive on a hostile world had become the foundation for something much larger. An alliance between species that could challenge the Vorth Empire across multiple star systems. The war was just beginning, but for the first time, the aliens were the ones who should be afraid. News of the mining complex assault spread through human military channels within hours. Colonel Hyunwoo filed reports that described new forms of warfare and unprecedented interspecies cooperation. Command response was immediate and overwhelming. General Park arrived with a full division of soldiers, xenobiologists, and strategic planners. The military wanted to understand, study, and if possible replicate what had happened on this remote world. But they also wanted to control it. The creatures who had fought beside humans were not pets or weapons to be commanded. They were allies who had chosen cooperation because they saw mutual benefit. When military scientists began talking about breeding programs and behavioral conditioning, Nara knew the alliance was in danger. The Deathstalkers had trusted her because she offered partnership, not domination. If humans tried to turn them into tools of war, that trust would be broken forever. She made a decision that would define the future of human expansion into the galaxy. Instead of working with military command to create more controllable versions of the alliance, she began teaching other survivors on other worlds how to approach indigenous species as partners rather than subjects. The revolution that started with one girl and one creature was about to spread throughout human space. The final battle began when Vorth orbital ships started charging their planet-killing weapons. Faced with total annihilation, the Alliance had to strike at targets beyond the planet's surface. This seemed impossible until the creatures revealed their greatest secret. Deep beneath the planet's crust lived the eldest ancient creatures the size of starships who had been sleeping for millennia. These beings possessed limited spaceflight capability and had been waiting for the right moment to reclaim their world from invaders. Nara's alliance with their surface descendants had finally awakened them. The eldest emerged from underground caverns in a spectacle that defied human understanding. Creatures larger than battleships took to the skies, their biological systems somehow generating the energy needed for space travel. They carried willing human pilots and creature warriors toward the Vorth fleet in the planet's orbit. The space battle that followed became legendary throughout the galaxy. Human technology and strategic thinking combined with creature biology and raw power to create a fighting force unlike anything the universe had ever seen. Vorth energy weapons designed to penetrate metal armor were useless against living tissue that could regenerate and adapt. Human pilots used the creature's natural abilities to perform maneuvers that would have been impossible with conventional spacecraft. The Vorth fleet, designed to fight other technological civilizations, found themselves facing an enemy that operated by completely different rules. Creatures that could survive in vacuum clung to the hulls of alien ships, tearing through armor with claws and teeth, while human commandos planted explosives in vital systems. Within hours, the Vorth orbital presence was eliminated. The surviving alien ground forces, cut off from supply and reinforcement, surrendered or fled the planet. The mining operations that had scarred the northern territories were shut down, and the process of healing both the land and the relationship between species began. Nara, now 19 and bearing the title of Ambassador between species, oversaw the establishment of the first truly integrated colony in human history. Humans and creatures worked together not just in warfare but in peace, combining their different abilities to build something neither could have achieved alone. The success on Kepler 442b became a model for human expansion throughout the galaxy. Instead of conquering and colonizing, humanity began forming alliances with indigenous species on worlds throughout the frontier. The girl who had once sat alone with a single creature beside her had sparked a revolution in how intelligent species could coexist. Captain Take, now General Take and commander of the Galactic Alliance forces, often returned to the valley where it all began. He would find Nara there with Baram, now gray around the muzzle but still strong, training new pairs of humans and creatures in the arts of cooperation and mutual understanding. The war with the Fourth Empire continued on other worlds, but humanity no longer fought alone. They had learned that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from conquest but from connection, not from domination, but from partnership. And it all began with one girl who saw a creature not as a monster to be feared, but as a friend who needed understanding.